Bueno, antes que nada, una bienvenida a esta tercera reunión del Foro FinTech. Realmente un placer estar aquí con ustedes el día de hoy. Hoy vía digital, siendo que estamos todavía desafortunadamente en la situación de la pandemia. Por cortesía a varios de los usuarios, a varios de los presentes, voy a hablar en inglés, pero sí, primeramente saludarlos a todos en español. Entonces empezaríamos, well, good morning. As I was saying in Spanish, it's a great pleasure to welcome you to the third meeting of the FinTech Forum, which, given the COVID-19 pandemic, will be digital. Perhaps this is a natural way to go forward in an increasingly digitalized world. Evidently, we miss not having you all in Mexico City, as we did last year. We're still uncertain whether for the next meeting, the forum members will meet face-to-face. In any case, I'd like to thank the Central Bank of Chile for kindly accepting to host it in Santiago next year, of course, if conditions allow it. To begin with, let me say that your interest in our events, and especially in this meeting, suggests that SEMBLA's role is perhaps even more important in these critical times. I'd like to thank our speakers and attendees for their response to our call. Today, we have close to 100 participants from 25 central banks, collaborating members, and industry representatives. I'd also like to thank our distinguished keynote speaker, Professor Darrell Duffy from Stanford. Professor Duffy will speak tomorrow about central bank digital currencies, interoperability of payment systems, and other equally interesting topics. Since our last meeting, several fintech issues have evolved considerably. Allow me to share some thoughts with you on a couple of them. First, I will speak on the pointed changes that many in the central banking community have experienced related to central bank digital currencies. Second, I'll survey regulatory challenges to bridge the gap on fintech data requirements. So let me go to the first topic, that is central bank digital currencies and the transformation of money and payments. As recently noted by Brunner Meyer and other scholars like Adrian, Duffy, Garat, and Kahn, our economies rely on public and private means of payments under the condition that they have the backstopping of the central bank, either as a direct or an indirect claim. This architecture brings to the fore the idea of what money entails, especially in light of the possible negative consequences of relying on private money creation, the latter even more so in times of crisis. The Chicago Plan and the Vollgeld, that is, the sovereign money initiatives, in addition to other more recent CBDC projects, including the digital currency electronic payment, that is the DCEP in China, the Sand Dollar in the Bahamas, the e-peso in Uruguay, and the like, are significant responses to the debate on what the role of private money should be. Relatedly, on what the role should be of a public infrastructure for money and payments. There need to be some answers, or at least a roadmap, as there is a rushing avalanche of technology-driven initiatives that could affect the key roles of money. The global stablecoins are perhaps the most challenging ones, as I will comment on later. Accordingly, central banks are being challenged as they need to strike a balance between a design of a central bank digital currency that combines a reliable and last generation infrastructure, which should be said to be fully interoperable while mitigating important concerns on cyber risks, and the expertise of traditional intermediaries, offering consumer protection and stable funding. These features provide comfort when using cash as the most fundamental form of money, among other important ingredients. But the balance is, by its own nature, complex and demands not only a good understanding of the economic and social needs of money and payments at the retail level, but also of the consequences on the wholesale domain. For instance, if deposit taking could be subjected to shocks under a scenario of adoption of a central bank digital currency, it could affect banks' funding severely. Many international institutions, including ours, are discussing, for example, whether this balance can be achieved by establishing monthly limits to holdings and transfers with CBDCs. Yet the unintended consequences of a CBDC cannot be fully envisioned at this point. The task is unprecedented, yet unavoidable. Even if it's not implemented in the short run, central banks need to be prepared just in case a global stablecoin or the like comes up. Only a couple of months ago, the Central Bank of Brazil needed to rapidly suspend a WhatsApp initiative to deploy a peer-to-peer payment feature in its global messaging platform. And while the central bank is open to foster competition into domestic payments, and financial services landscape, the potential risk of such an initiative by this big tech led the bank to swiftly defend the principles of safety and data protection that authorized financial and non-financial entities have had to and must comply with for a long time. This response has been, in effect, accompanied by an interesting central bank-led initiative on fast payments, named the PIX. This initiative, which is similar to CODI, which stands for Código Digital, launched earlier by Banco de Mexico, is a well-designed scheme to foster digital payments on a nationwide basis using QR technologies. And the underlying settlement platform is the Interbank Electronic Payment System, the so-called SPEI, which is a real-time gross settlement system owned and operated by Banco de Mexico. Let me comment that before CODI started to operate, commercial banks wanted to launch similar initiatives that would be running on private platforms. Even in the case of zero-cost transactions to incentivize the use of this type of scheme, the value and data privacy concerns of the information generated by such a payment scheme was considered to be extremely valuable by the Mexican Central Bank. In fact, it could be used in many ways by banks so as to direct users of the system to acquire other services by the bank in question. That is, it could be a way of making users captive consumers. For this reason, among others, it was decided that a fast payment scheme with these characteristics should rest on a public infrastructure. For its part, the US Congress and specialized antitrust commissions or entities have entered a tough battle against the Big Four, Google, Amazon, Facebook, and Apple, to outline how these big tech giants will be wielding their market power at the possible cost of fair competition and in consumer protection standards. Libra, the Facebook global stablecoin proposal, might only be the tip of the iceberg in private money creation by hitherto non-regulated new entrants. In the future, indeed, possibly the near future, central bankers will require a better understanding on what needs to be done to address the potential consequences for well-functioning monetary, financial, and payment scheme systems, given these ongoing developments. Initiatives like the CBDC's pilots in the Bahamas, by the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, and in Uruguay, the fast payment schemes in Brazil, Costa Rica, Dominican Republic, and Mexico, and the newly functional approach set by the central banks of Argentina, Colombia, Jamaica, and Peru are noteworthy examples of how we need to swiftly adapt to such a new and changing context. This leads me to the second issue I'd like to flag. If early actions are not taken, data gaps resulting from fintech developments can become unpleasantly and uncomfortably important. The global financial crisis brought several lessons for the global community of central banks and other financial regulators and supervisors. One of them was the weakness around data compilation and usage to identify and address certain risks taking place in markets. This, for example, contributed to Lehman's collapse and the ensuing well-known events. Moreover, with insufficient data, the diagnostics of the causes of a crisis may be wrong, inaccurate, misleading, or very well can be difficult or even impossible to do. That by itself can make it also very difficult to adopt or implement the correct policy prescriptions. Fintech activities have an impact on some of the core tasks at central banks like monetary policy, financial stability, payment systems, and economic and financial statistics. Now, fintech activities are creating data gaps because despite the relatively small size of these firms, their diversity and lack of adequate classification systems and data reporting frameworks make it cumbersome to include them properly within the central bank statistical systems. As fintech firms gain ground, it becomes critical to closely monitor their activities and fully understand their business models. Complexity and novelty are, in our view, some of the most significant challenges central banks will need to tackle in order to bridge the gap in terms of fintech data. The unbundled value chain of financial services might have become simpler from the complexity point of view. However, it creates new entities and new tools, and its technology is increasingly more complex in terms of supporting tools for the delivery of its services. In such an intricate environment, standards and interoperability, as well as data needs for regulatory and supervisory requirements, could quickly become a sort of moving target. That is, it could persistently place central banks and other financial regulators and supervisors behind the curve. Similarly, complex systems and entities demand complex coordination across an institutional architecture. Central banks could rapidly reach a point of inability to collect relevant data by fintech firms and thus create a gap, making it necessary to establish a coordinated data framework to embrace a complex ecosystem. In this context, additionally, inter and even intra-institutional coordination failure can become an important risk. Moreover, this situation can be categorized as a data governance problem, in which at least two important risks might arise. First, there could be, administratively speaking, one single unit in which the data are stored. A possibility is that such a unit hoards the data and makes it difficult for other areas to access it. We have seen this in the past, and it is plausible to see it again. The second, it could be the case that not enough promotion of the available data is done, preventing the timely identification of risks related to the upsurge of fintech activities. Now, previous international coordination work to improve data sharing and identification were relevant efforts, yet they did not suffice. A functional approach aimed at identifying and regulating roles, that is, functionality, instead of players, could be useful to overcome complexity issues. However, it takes time to put it in place. In fact, this approach is also something new in our thinking of financial stability. It's also novel to equip the staff with tools to implement such an approach. And it's also novel and expensive for the smaller reporting entities to get used to data reporting. Many tears will probably be shed by fintech firms on this front. In this context, it is important for authorities to convey to these firms and to the public in general the urgent need to collect this information so as to neutralize and counter possible complaints of excessive bureaucratic burdening by these firms, even leading to complaints that it hinders financial innovation. The Wire case helps to illustrate just how challenging is our task ahead. This fintech company, founded in 1999 in Munich as a payment gateway for collected card payments on online purchases, started looking as a hybrid of banking and non-banking service provider. If you allow me, quite similar to PayPal. After significant geographic expansion in Asia and a major capitalization between 2011 and 2016, the German Financial Supervisory Authority, BaFin, started facing difficulties to supervise its activities, including the acquisition of Citi's prepaid cards business in the US, and was not even able to provide an opinion on Wirecard's entry to the DAX 30, the first fintech to do so. Finally, this year, it was possible to unveil the round-tripping business of its CEO, a fraudulent scheme to evade money using third parties. Ironically, this did not happen in Germany, but in Singapore. Wirecard announced in June 2020 that nearly 2 billion euros were missing, which confirmed the multi-year accounting fraud of a growing and promising fintech. Data gaps can lead to serious consequences, as in this case. Evidently, filling data gaps may not be and probably isn't the only thing required to avoid or to detect this type of anomalies. Central banks and other relevant financial authorities must always have a clear picture of exposures and of the financial health of such large companies. And they must be able also to monitor and enforce financial institutions' compliance with regulations on a verifiable basis. Given, for example, the nature of a fintech like this firm, it is also key for central banks to have enough oversight powers to monitor closely prominent Wirecard-like payment infrastructure, and not just focus on wholesale, that is high-value payments, and market infrastructures, and to be able to discourage and or punish such practices so as to avoid generating systemic consequences to the overall financial system. To summarize, new data gaps are on the rise, and possibly hand in hand with the latter, also potential risks. Therefore, we must be at the fore on how we equip ourselves to effectively pursue stable monetary, financial, and payment systems. Considering the activities we have ahead of us, let me conclude by briefly presenting the work that our Innovation Hub has achieved during the last year. After the forum's meeting in 2019, Sembla launched the Hub as a supporting vehicle for our central banking community to leverage new technologies for operational and regulatory purposes. It started with 9 use cases led by Sembla and 7 by central banks of the region. These cases were devoted to explore how technologies like machine learning and complex network systems could be used by central banks to enhance their monitoring and analytical capacity for financial stability purposes. I'm proud to share with you that after months of intense work, some of these cases have been escalated to central banks boards' discussions on their potential to become part of the surveillance toolkit in their respective central banks. These impactful results will be mushroomed once the use cases reach their publication as academic papers in the Latin American Journal of Central Banking, which I trust all of you have heard about. Allow me here, before I continue, to present to you a brief commercial on our recently launched Latin American Journal of Central Banking in collaboration with Elsevier Publisher. The fact that we will be publishing in the journal most use cases, which have been worked out in close coordination between different central banks and SEMLA, with the expert advice by some academicians, and which will have been peer-reviewed, underscores how distinctive the journal will be. It will be a journal mainly for central bankers and about different aspects of central banking, not only about monetary theory and policy and other macroeconomic topics. Continuing with my remarks, the use cases have helped central banks to gain a better understanding of the interconnections among the various layers of their financial system, indeed to ultimately improve their capacity to identify systemic risk with high-tech algorithms. They have also shown that artificial intelligence can provide powerful techniques to detect anomalous behavior in payment systems participants. Additionally, using specialized data sets, such techniques have been key to identify new ways of forecasting macroeconomic performance, which is no less important. These use cases have allowed us to explore the application of the above-mentioned specific techniques. Nevertheless, we are prepared to explore other different tools like big data, sentiment analysis, and fraud detection, to name just a few. This depends critically on the new proposals that we will receive for the next edition of the course on FinTech for Central Banking to take place in 2021. Please wait for our call for proposals. This year, we are engaging in 4 new use cases on distributed ledger technologies and retail CBDCs. The method of work will be similar: a given central bank, SEMLA, and the academic support of experts from the University College London, that is UCL. The goal of these cases of the hub will be to drive deeply design choices and policy making around digital forms of fiat money. I'm confident that such efforts will significantly contribute to the central banks of the region to better understand the implications of CBDCs. For the rest of 2020 and in 2021, we already have set an ambitious program to build capacity in our central banks membership. From machine learning and subtech to blockchain, our array of training and policy analysis fora will continue in the same way new technologies are likely to continue. It is fair to say that this is one of our ways to contribute to the central banking of the future. As a final subject, let me share a couple of thoughts on the COVID-19 pandemic and how this could reinforce the opportunity for central banks to play an active role to embrace new technologies holistically. The 2020 Great Lockdown has led many people around the globe to heavily rely on e-commerce, while other digitally initiated services were also held as banks' branches closed and telecommuting became a crucial practice for social distancing and isolation. Activities like digital onboarding, P2P lending, and funds transferring follow the same explosive trend that digital payments experienced. It can be acknowledged that fintech firms were able to make the change given their specializations in tech-driven business and non-existent legacy systems. A post-COVID world brings to the fore the need for the central banking community to transform its current understanding of how we pursue monetary payments and financial. To name a few possible roads, in terms of financial stability and regulation, we need to focus more on how non-bank financial and payment service providers unbundle in order to provide a role and/or risk-based rather than entity-based response. In terms of payments and monetary systems, we need to think seriously about how we can safeguard the public component to ensure that they are safe and efficient and possibly widely accessible. In terms of coordination, the task is tremendously challenging, but forums like this one represent a meaningful vehicle, and SEMLA is, of course, a willing partner to continue fostering collaboration on this relevant subject and related ones. In closing, I'm sure that you will enjoy Professor Duffy's lecture on CBDCs as well as the rest of these sessions that have been carefully thought out to underscore the most relevant issues of our central banking community. For the forum members, I would like to express my gratitude for your meaningful contribution to the working groups and for the policy insights that you have put in the reports which we will present at the governor's fall meeting. I wish you a very successful digital meeting and look forward to meeting you again in person when the storm ceases. Thank you very much. Y bueno, pues es mi deseo que esta sea una muy exitosa reunión. Y bueno, bienvenidos nuevamente a todos. Y Serafín, te dejo el piso para que empiece la sesión. Muchísimas gracias a todos.